Here, Operation Christmas Star reached a climax as thousands of pounds of Christmas gifts donated by communities and organizations throughout the United States were unloaded from aircraft for distribution to all U.S. forces in South Vietnam. Planes and personnel of the Air National Guard and Air Force Reserve from states across the nation provided the cargo space for the special airlift. These boxes of Christmas gifts were flown to Vietnam by this C-97 of the California Air National Guard, one of the 82 aircraft which took part in the operation. More than 1 million pounds of gifts were collected in the United States, with collection and shipment under operational control of the Continental Air Command. Tonnage which could not be accommodated by the 82 programmed flights was scheduled for surface transportation. In Saigon on December 24th, as Christmas Eve approached, there was another expression of the holiday spirit. The scene was the Tong Tin Hoc orphanage, and other Saigon children not residents of the orphanage were interested and somewhat wistful spectators. The party officially began as Santa Claus, in the person of a U.S. Master Sergeant, arrived carrying a large bundle of toys. He was followed by a cake almost as large. The orphanage had been in existence only 2 months. Its residents ranged in age from birth to 3½ years, and this was the first Christmas party any of them had ever attended. The hosts were men of a U.S. Army replacement battalion stationed near Saigon. Members of the battalion were voluntarily sponsoring and financing the orphanage, with funds collected by payday donations and strategically placed cookie jars. Even the spectators derived a vicarious enjoyment. The party itself was sponsored by the replacement battalion, with many of its members acting as volunteer hosts, and they seemed to enjoy it as much as the youngsters. Toys were purchased by men of the battalion who had previously bought the orphanage a stove and refrigerator and were paying the nurses' salaries. The battalion chaplain joined in the festivities. This little girl was spoon-fed her first taste of ice cream. The party's climax drew near as the chaplain prepared to cut the cake. The cake, and the cookies as well, were baked by the battalion cooks on their own time. For these tiny guests at their first Christmas party, the payoff would come in the eating. For their hosts, the reward, perhaps, was even greater. Along the road to Phu To Hoa, Gia Định, Vietnamese orphans wave their flags to celebrate the building of a new orphanage. The date is 12 December 1965, and the Vietnamese Honor Guard salutes the arriving members of the U.S. Army Signal Corps, whose financial contribution made the new orphanage possible. As in all ceremonies of this kind, there were speeches to thank the U.S. servicemen. And the all-girl choral society performed as the assembled dignitaries looked on. For some 50 children, this day's groundbreaking ceremonies would never be forgotten. Even the government in Saigon took notice of the occasion and sent a special envoy to officiate on behalf of the people. ' At last, the solemn moment arrived when it was time to lay the cornerstone, and the Saigon representatives stepped forward to do the honors. When the cornerstone had been set in place, the civilian and military dignitaries returned to the platform, and the smallest orphans sang for them. With their gift of $3,000, the Army signalmen had created a new home for these unfortunate boys and girls. As the ceremonies came to a conclusion, the commemorative book was signed by the officials, and another civic action was complete.